This week is Parshas Naso. This is the week that we also celebrate Shavuos. So this Shabbos is the culmination of the holiday of Shavuos, because if a holiday happens during the course of the week, then Shabbos is the conclusion of the week. It also then is the completion of the holiday itself. And Parshas Naso, we're going to go through each Aliyah day by day. So the first Aliyah, which would have been for Sunday, we learn the Torah for each piece of the day, the daily piece of that Torah, and then of course on Shabbos we review all 7 days, and that's what we read from the Torah, that parsha. So the first Aliyah, which is corresponding to the day of Sunday of this week, after having told Moshe to count the Levite clan of Kohanim, so God instructed Moshe to count the Levite clan of Gershon, the family of Gershon. And again, the counting the Levium, when they initially counted all of the Levium, they counted the Levium from the age of 30 days and up. But now we're specifically counting the Levium who will be doing the service of the Mishkan, the service of the tabernacle. And so that begins at age 30 to 50. Under age 30 is not to fully develop strength, and past 50 is beginning to start waning strength. So these are the Levium between ages 30 and 50 who will be actually doing the work of the Mishkan, the tabernacle itself. And for the case of the family of Gershon, their job would be, when traveling through the desert, to carry the curtains of the Mishkan, the tabernacle, and the drapes for the tent of meeting. And this would be their particular avodah, their service. The second Aliyah, corresponding to Monday, God instructed Moses to count the third and final Levite clan, that of Merari, and Moshe then counted all 3 clans. And the family of Merari, their responsibilities would be in the transportation of the Mishkan, the planks of the Mishkan, the bars, the pillars, the sockets, the pegs, the ropes, all the implements for working involving those things. That is what they would be responsible for carrying when traveling in the desert. Then on the third day, the third Aliyah, corresponding to Tuesday, God told Moshe which people had become ritually defiled to varying degrees, which would not allow them into the various camps. This is, again, the camp of the Jewish people is a holy camp, and people defiled by different degrees have to remain at a distance from the camps in different degrees. So God then reviewed the laws of theft in order to encourage the Jewish people to make sure that they were not in any way guilty of sin before setting out on their journey towards the land of Israel. And God also told Moshe to teach the Bnei Yisrael, the Jewish people, some of the laws concerning the gifts to the Kohanim, the gifts to the priests. The priestly tribe will not receiving any inheritable land in Israel, but they will be receiving gifts from the Jewish people at all times, and that will be their inheritance. God's portion will be their inheritance. When we talk about the different camps, so there were 3 sections of the camp of the Jewish people as they traveled in the desert. And this was the camp within the camp where they are right within the holy, the temple, it's the sanctuary, the Mishkan, the tabernacle itself. This would be the camp of the Kohanim, surrounding. It's also called the camp of the divine presence, because that's the divine presence there in the Mishkan, in the tabernacle itself. Around them would be encamped the Levite tribe, and that would be Machane Levi. That would be the camp of Levi. And then from there, going out all the way to the end of the camps, where the Degalim, the flags, were flying in all 4 directions. All of that was called Machane Yisrael, the camp of Israel. So the 3 separate camps, and each camp had its own degree of kedusha, of sanctity, and so different levels of who was allowed to be there and who needs to move outside the camp of the Jewish people for the interim until they are purified again from whatever it was that caused their impurity. Number 4, this is the fourth Aliyah. This is corresponding to Wednesday. God instructed Moses the laws regarding a suspected adulteress. And then God taught Moses the laws governing a Nazirite, a Nazir. And following this, God taught Moshe how the Kohanim should bless the people after completing the morning services, the morning sacrifices. And so we're going to talk a little bit about each of those for just a second. The whole idea of the suspected adulteress. Now, if it was absolutely adulterous and when there's witnesses to it, there's a penalty. But we're talking about a situation where there's a suspicion and the husband is jealous. And when he's jealous, so that obviously is not a conducive environment for a marriage and appropriate environment. And so in order to dissuade his suspicions, so a few things have to happen. Ultimately, this shouldn't go this route. But if he suspects her and he has reason to suspect her because her behavior has not been completely appropriate, in which case there are suspicions. There's no witnesses to it, but there are suspicions. Therefore, there's a process that the husband brings his suspected adulterous wife to the Kohanim, and the process they go through there where they write a curse with God's name on a piece of parchment, and then they put that into water and dissolve it in the water, and she drinks it. And if she was adulterous, then she dies by the hand of God. If she was not adulterous, then essentially God is testifying to the husband, she didn't do anything. And therefore, they go back to a proper married life, and she actually is blessed. She is blessed for what she's been through, that she'll be blessed with children if she didn't have children before, or she'll be blessed with painless childbirth if she did have childbirth pains before. But the idea is, the essence part of this that I want to focus on today is God is willing to have his name erased in order to bring shalom bayis, peace in the home, peace between a husband and wife. That's an astounding thing, because we know you're not allowed to erase God's name. But for this purpose, to bring peace in the house, God is willing to have his own name erased into the waters. That should be a big lesson for all of us. The length to which we need to go to try and create shalom bayis, peace in the home, between husband and wife, between parents and children, between siblings. Peace is a very, very important thing. Let's talk about the Nazir. I'm on Perek Vav, the 6th chapter. It says, "The Eternal spoke to Moshe, saying, Speak to Bnei Yisrael, and you shall say to them, a man or woman who sets him or herself apart by making a Nazirite vow to become a Nazir, to abstain for the sake of the Eternal." What's the circumstance with what goes on here? This is actually contradictory. If you have an opportunity to consume something with a blessing, and a blessing before and a blessing after, and use the energy to serve God, you have an opportunity to elevate the world. That's why we're here, to make a dwelling place for God down in the lower place, down in this lowest world. So the idea is to take the world and elevate it. Our job is not to be sequestered in the mountains away from everyone else and trying to be holy. Our job is to be involved in the mundane, have a day job and work the job, and in that environment, elevate it to holy. Bring out the sparks of holiness within the mundane. That's a job. Now comes a guy who says, no, I'm not going to do that. Whether he says it for his 30-day period or a 60 or a 90-day period or a 6-month period, whatever the period he's taking his Nazirite vow, he is essentially saying, I'm going to abstain from wine and wine products, grapes and juice and the seeds and the peels, completely abstain from wine products in order to sanctify God. But God is the one who said you should make Kiddush Friday night. You're now telling him you're not going to make Kiddush with wine on Friday night and Shabbos day? Well, so how is this a holy thing? The Nazirite vow is coming right after the story of the Sota, the potentially adulterous wife. If a person gets into a situation where things could go south, and he wants to make sure he doesn't do that again, it's all right, God says. In fact, it's a holy thing to segregate oneself from a potential problem. So if someone has a tendency towards addictions of any kind, and he wants to completely forswear those things, and at least for a period of time, not forever, but for a period of time of a Nazirite vow, God says that's a holy thing to do, to separate yourself from anything that could come close to a temptation, and to stay away from those things for a period of time, and those things are holy. In fact, one of the things of a Nazirite is he has to let his hair grow long, and during the time of his Nazirite vow, his hair is considered holy. It becomes like a sacrifice. It served in the Mishkan, in the temple, because during this time that his hair was growing, he was dedicated himself totally to the service of God. So this is a very interesting switch on things, a switch from the norm of your job is to elevate the world. But if that becomes too tempting, and you get lost in it, then you can take a Nazirite vow to abstain from those things until you have it under control again. And so the idea here for a real Nazirite vow is all about wine and whitened products, and therefore that's the concept of the Nazirite vow. But truly, it's also with anything. It's not necessarily that you bring a sacrifice for it, but that there are times when it's appropriate to sustain from things, keep away from things. And towards the end of this Aliyah, of course, is the blessing of the Kohanim, where God tells Moses to tell Aaron and his sons that after all of the morning services in the temple, in the Mishkan, that they should turn around and bless the Jewish people. May the Eternal bless you and watch over you. May the Eternal cause his countenance to shine to you and favor you. May the Eternal raise his countenance towards you and grant you peace. And they shall bestow my name upon the children of Israel, so that I will bless them. And so God is going to bless the Jewish people. I was learning Aliyah's Neshama. I was learning for the elevation of the Neshama of someone who passed away in Lag BaOmer in Meron this year. And I was learning about the Korbanos, the Tamid, the morning services in the temple. And we talked about the Birchas Kohanim, the blessing of the Kohanim, at the end of the services in the temple itself. And I found that what's interesting is that outside of Jerusalem, it was sufficient for the Kohanim to put their hands out in front of them at shoulder level and bless the people. But inside the Beis HaMikdash, their hands had to be up over their head, where they would not be able to see their hands, because the Shekhinah, the divine presence of God, blesses the congregation through them, through their hands, and they shouldn't be looking up at the Shekhinah, the divine presence, that rests in their hands. Interesting note that I was learning this recently. Aliyah number 5, and this corresponds to Thursday. The Torah returns to the events of the first day of the previous month, the month of Nisan, in 2449, which was the first day that the Mishkan was officially functioning officially. On that special day, the Nasiim, the tribal princes of each of the different tribes, donated 6 wagons for the use of the Levium, for the service of the temple, in transporting components of the tabernacle. And they pledged a set of sacrifices in the inauguration for the altar. The sacrifices of all 12 princes was identical, but the Torah enumerates them all separately, each one of them. And this is an important lesson in and of itself, is that even though they all gave the same thing, the intentions behind each one, the resources behind each one, the individuality that was being contributed was different. Each tribe has its own strength, each tribe has its own challenges, and all of that goes into what they are contributing. Even though everything was identical, but it was coming from a different tribe and the essence of each different tribe as well, which to us is a very important lesson regarding the team. The team is a whole, but it's the whole is equal to the sum of its part. And in fact, we've said that the whole is equal to more than the sum of its parts, because of the synergy of all of it compounded together. So there's another interesting part in this fifth Aliyah. It says that it was on that day that Moshe finished erecting the Mishkan, and he anointed it, sanctified it, and all its vessels, and the altar and all its vessels. But Moshe didn't build it. It's crediting this to Moshe. In fact, Rashi, there's a comment here that says, Betzalel, Oliav, and other wise-hearted people, they made the Mishkan. They built the actual Mishkan. Yet the Torah attributes this to Moshe. And this is because he expended great effort to see to it that every single thing was built according to the way that God had commanded him to have it built. He expended great effort to make sure that every detail was exactly as it should be. And so because of how much he extended himself into it, it's called by his name. And the same thing we see when it comes to building the temple in Jerusalem. It's called Beis David. It's the house of David. The house that David built, right? It's God's temple, but it's the house that David built. But David didn't build it. He wasn't allowed to build it because he had blood on his hands from all the wars he fought. But he said he did everything to prepare for it, to have everything ready, purchasing of the land, purchasing of the materials, bringing everything together. Shlomo HaMelech, his son, Solomon, he built it. But even when it came to the time of the inauguration and opening of the doors wouldn't open until it was mentioned in the schus, in the merit of David, because of the energy he put into it. And so too that we see in leadership responsibilities that if we take the full responsibility of leadership in supporting our people to get something done, so the credit is extended also to us because we've led the facility, we led the program. Even though we didn't do the work necessarily, but we helped facilitate it, got behind it, and made sure that those who were going to do it had what they need to do it and could succeed in it. Another interesting part about this story about the princes bringing their donations, which I find is interesting, is that when Moses had opened up the opportunity, we're going to build the Mishkan, and here's all the things we need. So everybody donate what you'd like. Whatever your heart moves you to donate, you should donate. And the princes at that time, they said, let's let everybody donate, and whatever's missing, we'll make up the difference. Whether that's small or whether that's large, whatever the difference is, we will contribute to make up the difference, the shortfall of whatever isn't presented that is needed for the building. And shortly thereafter, everything was so much in plenty, donated in such plenty, that Moses had to say, stop, enough, don't bring anything else. We have more of everything than we can actually use, so don't bring any more. And the princes missed out. They didn't get a chance. There was nothing to bring. And so at the end, they were able to donate the shoham stones, the onyx stones that sat on the shoulder of the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, and each tribe got to donate one stone, the stone that would be for their tribe in the chest plate of the Kohen Gadol. So even though they wanted to be generous, they got to jointly contribute to the chest plate, the shoulder plate, the shoulder stones, and one stone for the breastplate, and that was because they hesitated. When there's something good to be done, jump in. Don't hesitate. Jump in. Don't wait. So at this point, when it was the time for the inauguration, they jumped in. They jumped right in, and each one said he was going to bring all of these different things to contribute to the inauguration of the Mishkan. So a lesson learned. Don't hesitate. Jump in when there's a good thing to be doing. Jump in to do it. The sixth Aliyah, which corresponds to Friday, this is the Torah continues to list the offerings of each of the tribal princes, the Nesiim, inaugurations of the Mishkan at the time. The seventh Aliyah, the last Aliyah, which is also then read on Shabbos, after concluding the account of each of the offerings of the Nesiim, the Torah summarizes the totality of all of the grand totals of all of their gifts together. So again, you see the importance of the individual gifts, but also the totality of that which is accomplished by all of them together. So it's the contribution of the individual, but also the contribution as a whole, as a group. The Torah then describes how God spoke to Moses inside the Mishkan, inside the tabernacle. Moses would hear God's voice loud, like he did on Mount Sinai, and yet the sound stopped at the edge of the Mishkan. Outside, they didn't hear a thing. But inside, Moshe heard it as loud as it was Mount Sinai itself. But outside, no one could hear. This is Parshas Naso, the weekly Parsha, and I hope this was enjoyable, and have a wonderful Shabbos.